Jack Posobiec, we are back live. I want to bring on attorney Will Chamberlain with the Article 3 project. Will, walk me through these jury instructions specifically. And guys, do we have that tweet that Jonathan Turley put up regarding this question of, there's always been this doubt about what is the underlying crime that makes all these things a felony. So, Will, if you could, and we're going to pull that tweet up, but if you could explain to us why the underlying crime is so important, and also this confusion over what that underlying crime is, and should the jury agree on what the underlying crime is.
So the charge in this case is falsification of business records. On New York law, that's normally a misdemeanor. To make this a felony, it has to be in the first degree, meaning that it's in service of another crime, in furtherance of another crime. And so the question is, what is that other crime? From the outset, Trump's legal team and many legal observers have said that there needs to be specificity about what that crime is. It needs to be proven in court, and there needs to be unanimity as to what that crime is. But Bragg and Justice Merchan have said, no, actually, there doesn't need to be unanimity. We don't need to tell you what the crime is till the very end. And even if the jurors don't agree on which crime this was in furtherance of, if they all agree that there was a crime that this was in furtherance of, then that's sufficient unanimity to find President Trump guilty. And in particular,
and Will,
go ahead.
When just quick question, when you say unanimity, what you're saying is the jury has to agree to the charges. The jury, all 12 members of the jury, and everyone who's watched like any movie about a jury, or for people who haven't served on one, it's pretty common knowledge that for the jury to find someone guilty, by the way, or to acquit, they all have to agree on each section. Now, each charge you could come down differently on that. We all understand that. Each element of each element of the crime. But the idea that there's something that they don't have to agree on sounds a little bit different than what we're used to. Yes,
it is, especially when it comes to the elements of the crime. I think it's a very, very clear due process violation. There's clear Supreme Court precedent on, at least for federal crimes, that there needs to be unanimity as to if there's a predicate in a particular criminal statute, then there needs to be unanimity not just on the crime generally, but also on the predicate. And that's a due process violation if there isn't. So this is just one of many reversible errors that Judge Merchan has committed as the judge in this case. And as a result, it seems pretty obvious that he's just hoping to help Biden win with a conviction, even if that conviction can't stand up on appeal.
So the idea then is, so let's say, okay, devil's advocate, let's say Trump's found guilty on all or some of the charges. What kind of time frame would he be looking at for overturning that on appeal?
Well, I think it depends, right? Like sometimes obviously, that's a very lawyer answer, right? It depends, but I'm not familiar with New York procedure, but just, from what it looks like in the federal court system, you can ask for an injunction to stop enforcement. Usually you have to make a pretty strong showing that the decision below was wrong. And I'm sure that in the event of a conviction here that President Trump's legal team will do that. They'll try and basically stay any, attempt to enforce the verdict and put Trump in jail. I saw some mixed, I've seen mixed things, because on the one hand, the level of felony this is, I think under New York law, it is in fact required jail term. But I've seen people on Twitter saying the opposite, and I'm not really sure. I can't say that I have done enough detailed research to know what the potential penalty is here. But I know, if they've raised this up to a felony, I think that I would be surprised, I guess, if jail time wasn't a possibility.
And this is what we were talking about yesterday when the news broke out of CBS that the Secret Service has met with local jail officials in New York to discuss that very. Can we step back for a second here and say, this is what we've crossed the Rubicon for. The Secret Service is holding meetings with local jail officials on what the circumstances of the incarceration of a former president who is entitled to lifetime Secret Service protection would be. So what are the prison officers then protecting the Secret Service officers? How does this work? Over something where the judge has told the jury incorrectly that they don't even need to agree on what the underlying crime is. Yeah,
it's really shocking that, and it turns the New York legal system into a joke, which turns the American legal system into a joke. It's a shameful episode, a stain on our country's history, honestly, and it's certainly a stain on everybody in the New York office who's involved with this. Hopefully one day we'll get accountability. I think that it's challenging, obviously, but J.D. Vance had a pretty good criminal referral to talk about the fact that there's been effectively a conspiracy against President Trump's rights as a result of all this. The combination of, a malicious, unlawful prosecution, unlawful orders throughout, an unlawful gag order, and all done to interfere in a presidential election. It's really appalling.
And it's something, by the way, I've said that very same, since we're going to be applying that to basically everyone now, that's the same thing they've gone after Trump for, they're going after Doug Mackey for this, et cetera. I would certainly apply that same charge to pretty much any NGO or even government official who is facilitating the importation of illegal aliens into this country. It's a conspiracy against all our rights. Obviously it is. And if we're just going to be interpreting whatever we want into that, then fine. Conspiracy against rights.
Yeah, I think you have the right attitude, which is, this is obviously a very vague statute and in a perfect world wouldn't exist. But in a world where the Democrats are going to wield the statute as unilaterally as a weapon, well, I'm not for unilateral disarmament. And what's been done to President Trump and been done to Republican voters everywhere effectively by trying to deprive us of our choice, not just here, but think of all the Colorado case where they were trying to kick Trump off the ballot via unlawful means. All that should be seen as conspiracy against rights.
And of course, we're looking at this now. We have no indication. This is, of course, it reminds me of when, maybe 2.5 years ago, when we saw the last criminal trial that we watched in the political world with probably this level of detail was the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. And when that jury goes, Will, just 2 minutes till the break, but, is there anything you can do at this point once the jury goes behind those doors?
It's up to the jury. I've had people ask me, how long will this take? And the answer is, I don't know, man. It'll take as long as it takes. It'll take as long as, do the juries agree? If the jurors agree, this doesn't take very long. If the jurors don't agree, then this can take a really long time. And so the only people who have a good idea of how long this is going to take are in that jury room. And so, who knows? We may get they may come out, they might acquit him, they might convict him. They haven't spoken. We don't talk to these people. We don't know what they think. And gosh, if you're talking about a case where the actual underlying facts are not going to be nearly as predictive of the ultimate result, this is the one. There's no more politically important criminal prosecution that probably has ever happened in our nation's history. So, the fact that politics plays such a role in these jurors' decisions and these jurors' attitudes, the fact that there's so much obvious bias one way or the other. It's not merely that there's bias against President Trump. There's also plenty of jurors who are probably biased for President Trump. So you really just have no idea what you're looking for here or what the end result. I
would say just gut assessment. I would if the jury comes back early, that's probably not a good sign for President Trump's team. If they extend this out, the longer they extend, the better it gets for President Trump. I think Kyle Rittenhouse, it was 3 or 4 days. They had one holdout. They were able to flip at the very end to not guilty. And I think that's probably a situation you're going to see. Obviously, in a hung jury, that's something that does extend out, and that's probably their best chance right here. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Will Chamberlain, attorney for the Article 3 Project, joins us breaking down the show trial of Donald Trump.
Attention all seniors. You can now get up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, including your credit card debt, with no medical exam, starting at less than $1 a day.
Honey, your dad and I can't stop talking about this baby that's coming.
We've also been thinking a lot about our future. And no matter what, We want to make sure we aren't leaving you and your family with any of our debts.
Just last week, we read that the price of a funeral can be $8,000 or more.
Wow. Jeff and I definitely would not have the money to pay for that.
And that's just the funeral. But you don't have to worry. We called, and with one phone call, we were eligible for $50,000 for our funeral and final expenses.
Well, that's great. But don't you need to take a medical exam to qualify? You and Mom have some health issues.
No, there's no medical exam, and we were able to get coverage right over the phone.
And our rates can never be increased. Our benefits can never be decreased, and our coverage can never be canceled.
I'm so glad you made that call.
Don't leave loved ones with your debt. Call 800-560-0879 now and see if you qualify for up to $50,000 for your funeral and other final expenses, starting at less than $1 a day. There's no medical exam, and you can be approved even if you have pre-existing health conditions. Your rates can never be increased, your benefits can never be decreased, and your coverage can never be canceled. There's no obligation. Call 800-560-0879 now. There's no paperwork, no hidden fees, and no waiting periods. And you can start coverage right over the phone, starting at less than $1 a day. Call 800-560-0879. That's 800-560-0879. 800-560-0879.
When I grew up in the hood, I rolled with Bloods. And them boys had a saying. You can't be listening to all that slappy whack, trim out his a bam ship, nippy bam bam, like Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec back live, Human Events Daily. Folks, the world is in flames and Bidenomics is a complete and total disaster, but it cannot and will not ruin my day. Do you know why? It's because I start my day with a hot America First cup of Blackout coffee. This coffee is 100% America. Blackout coffee is 100% committed to conservative values. From sourcing the beans to the roasting process, customer support and shipping, they embody true American values and accept no compromise on taste or quality. Look, everybody knows that my dad got to meet with President Trump over the weekend, and right afterwards he said, Jack, I need some of that brutal awakening from Blackout coffee. So we went over to blackoutcoffee.com/POSO. We made sure to get promo code POSO20 because that will give you 20% off your first order. Look, we know summer's here, so give those close to your heart the gift of being awake, not woke, with Blackout Coffee. That's blackoutcoffee.com/POSO, blackoutcoffee.com/POSO, promo code POSO20. Will, by the way, I want to go over this idea of unanimity again, that unanimity is something that is essential in these cases, that the fact that the judge has just said you can have a 4-4-4 split is just something that's completely foreign, completely alien to our legal system. Still Boneless, who's watching the show at home, sent us, or at work, or probably on the side of the road, I think he lives in like a ditch somewhere, that Richardson v. United States, 1999, the jury must be unanimous as to the series of underlying defenses in a CCE prosecution. But not only that the jury must unanimously agree, not only that the defendant committed some continuing series of violations, but also about which specific violations make up that continuing series. So again, it's just language backing up what you've been saying, that you need unanimity.
The Richardson case, I know.
Please.
I know. I don't know that it is absolutely binding on state courts, right? Because it's a way of it talks about that this is how we should be interpreting federal statutes. But I think there is language in that case that talks about how the problem of if you don't have unanimity on a predicate crime, there's a due process violation. And if that language should be binding. But this is one of those areas of the law where I'm like, I need to actually read not just this case, but a few other cases to get a real handle on whether or not to what extent does this bind a state court? Because obviously, like states are responsible for the interpretation of their own statutes, and the state Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of that, subject to you're not allowed to violate the federal Constitution.
Right, and so the idea still being, though, is that these ideas, look, walk me through this. So here's something that I don't think a lot of people get, and that Judge Schrader in Kyle Rittenhouse's case brought this up a lot. this whole idea of 12 people on the jury going in and requiring unanimity, is that just something that we arbitrarily came up with at random? Did the founding fathers sit down and pick a number out of a hat? Or is there some long, serious tradition that this is drawing from?
I mean, this is going all the way back to the founding, and the right to trial by jury is an extraordinarily basic right. It's one of the things that the Americans, patriots, were not happy about with the British, thought that it was tyrannical to basically not be tried by a jury of your peers, instead just be tried by the judge, who became both the arbiter of both law and fact, and that people who are criminally prosecuted ought to have the protection of a jury of their peers. And also it's about, where basically the system should err on the side of the liberty of the criminal defendant, meaning that, if you can't get unanimity from a jury, if there's even one holdout, then that's not sufficient to get a conviction. You have to get every juror to agree.
And this is huge. You're talking about, so when I talk about the foundations of our republic, when I talk about the foundations of the system by which we define liberty, I know the libertarians and their presidential candidate might have a slightly different definition than myself, but I'm talking about the one that was instituted in 1791 under the Constitution, the current Constitution that we have, and has been litigated ever since. It had a clear definition. I mean, some of these terms go all the way back to ancient Rome, some of these concepts, being able to face your accuser, for example. I mean, these are not new concepts. These are the very foundations of Western civilization. And what you have are, and I'm sorry, I've been asking everyone this week, Will, but I'm sure you've seen there's been some people who've been very upset with me for calling these types unhumans and having a very mean book title. I've been accused of having a mean.
You've been too mean to communists? Oh no. Anyway.
Yes, I'm being too mean to the communists by calling them unhumans, but that is exactly what they are doing. Of course, they would want to chip away and undo and unravel the very founding network and makeup of our republic and replace it with whatever communist gobbledygook crap they can find. That's what they always do. That is what they do. That is what they always do. And if you'd like to go to unhumansbook.com, you can pre-order from myself and Joshua Lysak. But Will, talk to me a little bit about that, where it seems like this guy Mershon is just, it feels like he's just making it up on the fly.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a different view of the criminal justice system. Most people, I think, would look at the criminal justice system as there to protect the innocent and to put away wrongdoers and to protect life, liberty, and property. But the unhumans, as you put them, I think view the criminal justice system as a tool to wield power against their political opponents. And in fact, they're not particularly interested at all in ensuring that the average citizen is safe on the streets and that basic crimes are prosecuted. No, that's not the issue. The issue is how can we use the power of the law as such to imprison and marginalize the people who might take power from us.
And a lot of this goes back, of course, and people also don't want to say, there's a lot of people who want to say that America doesn't have a specific founding from a specific set of people, and it's just not true, because the 12 jurors has an Anglo history. This is English history. It goes back over 850 years, of course. I'm getting the notes in now. Medieval England. It goes back to the Henry II in the 12th century, particularly with the Assize of Clarendon in 1166, which established the use of a jury in the justice system. Because, of course, prior to that, you just went to the court's judge, and the judge would just sort of decide, and off you go.
Mm. And that's still true in many places. The use of the jury is not something that happens everywhere. You go to France, for instance, and if you're a criminal prosecution in France, there's no jury. You're just facing a judge.
Right. So you want to mess with this stuff. This is you're chipping away at the very bedrock. I think actually in Japan they have something interesting where they have a panel of judges, and some of which are professional judges, and then others are like citizens who act as judges. So it's sort of a mix between juror and judge. So you're appointed a member of the judge's panel for that trial. It's totally not, which again, that's their system. They're Japanese. They want the Japanese system. We're Americans. We have a specific American legal and justice system that is based on our Anglo-American heritage. And it's just a fact. It's just a fact. And when you start having people that come up through the ranks, and yes, this definitely gets into an immigration argument, but when you start having people come in who don't come from places that have no history of this whatsoever, it doesn't seem that important to them.
Yeah, I mean, that's also true of other aspects of due process and the First Amendment. I mean, we think of these things, I think there's a big conceit, especially among liberals, to think of our liberties as kind of universal, when in reality they can be very particular to our system, to our heritage.
Yep.
This is something that the national conservatives are really good about, and I think Yoram Hazony has written beautifully about this. The fact that people take for granted how their liberties are the idea that these liberties are universal is just wrong, and fostering your own distinct heritage and making sure you preserve the institutions that protect it is really important if you want to keep the liberties you have.
Well, and a lot of people talk about George W. Bush trying to export our liberties into the Middle East, and obviously, I think we all kind of get that didn't go so well. But what they also miss is that going all the way back to 2000, George W. Bush was campaigning on bringing in as many people as possible from the third world, particularly Latin America, particularly South America, and saying the more we get, it's just going to increase our liberties, and they're going to enjoy in our freedoms and bask in them. And it's just complete failure, complete and utter failure. These are countries that have a completely different. The way I'd put it is this. And I'd even say it to, my sort of, libertarian leaning folk colleagues, is that these are countries that have a very different relationship between the government and the people. The United States is a very particular relationship between the government and the people, and that's only because of the unique history of the United States. No one else has that history, ergo, you need to be very careful with immigration. Last minute on all of this, Will Chamberlain.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to that. And I think that, a big part I wanted to talk about is the idea that for our democracy to work, the parties need to honor each other. They need to honor each other's leaders, because that ultimately facilitates the peaceful transfer of power and means that we aren't playing winner take all every time somebody takes power. But the thing that these prosecutions, they're a massive breach of that principle. You're prosecuting the leader of the opposing political party. And at this point, I mean, when people talk about what banana republics do, this is what banana republics do.
Precisely that. Will, tell us where they can go to follow not just the Article 3 project, but A3P action.
Right. So article3project.org is the general head place to go for the website, but a3paction.org should be of very significant interest to your listeners. It's a place where with just a few clicks, you can send an email or make a phone call to your congressman and alert them about what, particular issues. For example, there's a big one that we're pushing now about trying to get Representative Clyde Ryder to defund all of the lawfare against President Trump. We're trying to get that attached to this bill. So if you you contact your congressperson and make it clear that you want this to happen, that can have a real impact on how they think. And a3paction.org makes it very easy for you to do so. So you should check that out.
Will Chamberlain, always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you for your deep analysis and insights into what is going on, the fall of our civilization.